And I will begin, kick off the meeting by calling two rolls. As usual, first will be committee members and their designated alternates, and the second will be ACUS members not on the committee and any of their designated alternates. So when I call your name, please unmute yourself, say hi, hello, whatever takes your fancy, and then unmute yourself, or excuse me, remute yourself so that we can, make sure everybody's microphones are working. So without further ado, we'll start with committee members. Mr. Gregory Baker, with us yet?
Present and accounted for.
Thank you so much, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bernie Bell, have you managed to join us yet? All right. He said he would join us, although he might have to arrive late or leave early. So hopefully we'll get the benefit of Bernie's vast experience. Mr. Warren Belmar.
Present.
Thank you much. Amy Bunk.
Here.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for joining us. Bill Funk, I saw you earlier.
Here.
Great to see you. John Kamensky.
Present.
Great to see you, John. David Lewis.
Yep, here.
Great to see you, David. Mike Lazaha. Okay, hopefully you'll join us later. Erica Lunder.
I'm here.
Great to see you. Thanks for joining us today, Erica.
Thank you.
Nina Olson. Nina, well, she said she'd be joining us, so hopefully we'll see her shortly. Oh, here she is.
I think she's joining right now.
Yeah, great. Hi, Nina. Thanks for joining us today. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. Here I am, but I'm going to go off because I'm eating lunch. I'm going to go off camera for a bit.
Great. Thank you. Jesse Panuccio.
Here.
Thanks for joining us today, Jesse. Eloise, our illustrious chair, is obviously with us.
I am here.
Cheryl Stanton.
I'm here. Thank you.
Great to see you, Cheryl. Are there any members of the committee present today whose names I have not called? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed on to the second roll of ACUS members that are not on the Administration and Management Committee. I believe we have two today. Jack Bierman, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks.
Fantastic. And Matt Weiner, who I also heard earlier.
Yes, I'm here. And I'll probably need to leave a little bit early, but thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And with that role accomplished, I will go ahead and hand things back to Eloise. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks for that. Well, I'm really happy to see everybody. Thanks for being here. We have a lot of work to do today, so we're going to get there. But first, I'm going to read to you the standard ACUS meeting protocols that we're all on the same page. So I'll just remind everybody that only ACUS members, which includes government members, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsel, whether or not on the committee, and their designated alternates have full speaking privileges. I'll ask everybody to keep the microphone on mute, and I prefer that everybody use Zoom's hand raise feature if you'd like to speak, and I'll call on you that way. If you can't find the hand raise feature, if it's too hard to do, it's been a little bit re-designated under the new Zoom upgrade. It's now under React, which is the little heart-shaped button at the bottom. If it's hard or complicated to find that, and you want to be recognized, just put in the chat that you'd like to be recognized, and I'll call on you then. Don't put your substantive comment in the chat, though. We don't want substantive sidebars unfolding that way. When I call on you, you can unmute yourself, and once you're unmuted, please state your name and membership affiliation before providing your comments. And once you've concluded your remarks, please remember to remute. Ideally, I'll ask everybody to use the webcam so that we can facilitate conversation. And with respect to attendees other than ACUS members and alternatives, participation requires the unanimous consent of the committee members. Time permitting, I'll consider calling on such attendees at appropriate points and will presume that committee members consent absent their raising an objection. So if any such participant would like to speak, go ahead and use the Zoom hand raise feature or identify yourself in the chat that you'd like to speak. Okay, I've already read this part out loud, but I'll say it again, that for all participants, please use the chat feature only to indicate that you'd like to speak or to vote when asked, but let's not hold sidebar discussions or put substantive comments in the chat feature. And as a reminder, only members of the committee may cast a vote when one is called for. And we have a list of who those people are. So don't vote if you're not sure, and we can turn to Conrad if we need to have a vote on anything today. Okay, so we have a lot to do today, as I said at the beginning. So I want to remind everybody that I think it's likely that we're going to be using our third meeting. That third meeting is next Friday, May 3rd. To wrap up consideration. And ideally, if you want to speak today, you will have actual specific text that you'd like to propose so that we can be really facilitating our conversation around specifics whenever possible. Okay, so that's all that I have to say preliminarily. Conrad, is there anything else you need me to do before we jump right into things? Okay, so I think we'll jump right into things. So thanks again to everybody for preparing in advance. Last time we got through the first 5 recommendations, which fall into the first 2 categories. However, Bernie Bell has proposed 2 additional paragraphs or recommendations. So we now have 2 new things to circle back to. And we also, the Committee on Style made a few conforming changes, and I think Cheryl Stanton also submitted a couple of things. The way I'd like to proceed though is because Bernie's not here, and I think it makes sense to reconsider these things in one fell swoop, again, considering how much we have to do. What I'd like to do is pause consideration of what's now paragraphs 1 through 7, and we'll circle back to those when Bernie arrives. So I'd like to begin with the section that's called Using Technology to Streamline Request Management and Resolution. So this is now, we have 3 recommendations here. And Conrad, I don't think we actually have any suggestions here. Is that correct? We just have a question from you at the end. So I think let's start with what's now paragraph 8. The one that begins consistent with their resources. Let's spend just a minute taking a look at that. And then I will ask for hands or comments in the chat for anybody who'd like to propose any language or ask any questions about any of this. So we're focused in line 123, new paragraph, or what is now paragraph 8. Okay, so I'm looking for hands. I see Jack has a hand up, and I will call on Jack.
Thank you. I guess I immediately used the privilege of debate, even though I'm not a member of the committee. I had written in my comments a general question about whether to mention the uses of ticket numbers and such that many organizations use. It seems like many organizations that I deal with customer service issues do that, and I'm just wondering if that's too specific in the committee's minds, or if there's a reason not to.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I had seen your comment. I think it was attached to the SOP language above at line 58, but I actually agree with your instinct that maybe it belongs here. And so what do people think about that? So so just the idea is, do we want to be recommending that agencies, attach a ticket number? And if so, would it belong under technology, or would it belong under the general SOP? If it belongs under the general SOP, we can circle back to it when we get back up there. But if it belongs to technology, we should think about how to say it here. Nina.
So I can just say that it depends obviously on the size of the requests, but if you're dealing with cases, you already have a case management system that is putting a case number on that, inquiry. And many, at least in the Taxpayer Advocate Service, we had a special code that designated it as a congressional request. So you could actually sort your case management system to find out, you know, all the information on the case, including cycle time, when it was submitted, who's been assigned. So a ticket number would mean, you know, I don't think we should say ticket number. I think it needs to be something more general but I just think a case management system or a tracking system of some sort is you're going to have that ticket number in an electronic case management system.
And Nina, do you have a view on whether this suggestion belongs here under the using technology
I think so,
place, or whether it belongs under the SOP provisions above?
Well, that's a good question, because I was actually going to say, if some agencies don't have, you know, a specific case management system, they might have a correspondence management system, and all of them give some assignment of a number so that you can track them. So maybe under standard operating procedures, you're saying there has to be some kind of system, like where you're saying for receiving, processing, and responding, maybe there you add, you know, including a number assignment or a method of tracking these cases, but maybe you just add something like including an assignment of a case number or ticket number. I don't know.
Now, I'm still wondering about whether it belongs here under technology or whether it belongs under the
And actually,
SOP
I was saying
provision.
it should be up in 1A.
In SOP. Yeah. So
it's kind of
okay. So can you sort of cut and paste that,
Maybe
Conrad?
putting
And again, I really want to come back to everything in 1A or in one separately, but since Jack just raised this here. Sean?
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if Nina had an opinion as to whether or not the number designating the request as a congressional one was useful, if that's something that could be replicated by other agencies.
I think it's very useful because your case management system just is giving a number to the case. And so being able to sort on this is a congressional case just gives management a much greater tool to track cycle time, quality, etc. I know this is later, but we actually used it to do a congressional customer satisfaction survey. You know, we were able to pull certain cases and then actually do a survey of the congressional offices asking them, you know, what was your experience with our assistance in this case? Were we prompt? Were we professional? Did you think we were accurate? Did we respond to the concern that was raised? And otherwise, we would have had to do all sorts of jerry rigging in our system to identify those cases.
So why don't we think about referencing this in the technology section, but actually first identifying it in the SOP section? I don't know that. Do you think that we need to get into the level of detail about that Sean was just asking Nina about whether the proposed docketing number should include some sort of specifics that indicates that it's I feel like that might be getting a little bit too much into the weeds, but I'm curious to know what other people think.
I mean, we've couched all of these things in terms
where
of
appropriate
and where appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. I see. I want to call in John and Jack again, but Conrad, I'm not sure what you're doing. I'm wondering if you can. Do you have a placeholder? You have an assignment of a case number or ticket number, and now you're thinking about.
I was thinking about adding a little placeholder here to reflect about referencing the assignment of case numbers, ticket numbers.
But the idea is that at the moment, I think we're leaning towards including that in the long list under SOP above.
In that case, there's no need for a placeholder.
Okay, but let's go to John.
What about the phrase unique identifier as opposed to tickets or something like that. So that way
Yeah.
it leaves it up to the agencies as to what they call it and what they do.
Yeah, that sounds good. John, I'm sorry, not John. Conrad. Yeah, I would like it to be up here in one unless I hear strong suggestions otherwise. And so we need to include it. We need to include it in somewhere between A and whatever. Jack?
Yeah, I just know, the thing is that there is a reference to tracking in the first standard operating procedures. It says agency should develop standard operating procedures for tracking and managing such requests. So I guess that's why and I agree with what John just said. I'm not sure the phrasing exactly, but some sort of trackable identifier, it would be maybe the way to phrase it. But I think that it ought to be included in the technology. I think there ought to be maybe a reference to that in technology section.
Yeah.
Trackable identifier or something like that,
Yeah.
such as a
Let me-
docket number or tracking number. Or,
Let me
case
ask you this
number.
now. Since Jack is completely right, of course, that the first sentence before we even get into the list says the word tracking, do we actually need to call out unique identifier or whatever language we decide to use as one of the lettered items below? Or can we just add something to this cover first sentence in lines 56 through 58?
It looks to me like maybe in C. Or D, including.
Yeah, okay. The agency's use of electronic case management or other systems employed for managing, comma, including the use of a unique identifier.
I would say trackable.
Okay, great.
Trackable identifier. Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into be specific, such as a case number or ticket number. I mean, something like, I think people with more experience in how this stuff works would have better language maybe than me.
Okay, for managing, I think this whole phrase has to come after status updates, comma, for managing casework requests and status updates, comma, including the use of a trackable unique identifier. I'm okay with this. If people want to add such as a docket number or case management number, we could do that. Any views on this? Such as a docket number. Okay, let's leave that for now and then we'll come back. Let's go back and deal with the rest of the technology. Let's consider that we're going to come back once Bernie's on and we're kind of reconfiguring with the new paragraphs and all of the coordinated language. But now that we have a placeholder up in the first section for SOPs about having some sort of a number, do we want to add a reference to something about that in what's now paragraph 8, starting at line 124? I'm not actually sure that we need to once we have included, it already says, allow managers to monitor the status of requests. And once we've said that they should have some sort of tracking number above, I'm not sure that we need to say more about that here. But I wonder if people think otherwise. Okay, I'm taking silence on paragraph 8 to maybe be that we're okay with it, but I would also love to call on Amy and then David. Amy, over to you.
Oh, yeah. So moving beyond the tracking number issue, just a note about the electronic case management systems or web-based portals. So at the Office of the Federal Register, they have both. So they have a web-based portal that feeds into their case management, their docket processing systems. So not sure or is really what you want there. Because I'm not sure that's, you have one or the other, you could have both.
So electronic case management systems could be within the web-based portal. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or I have no real preference, but I thought I would raise that since you asked.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. My only hesitation to putting and slash is that's the kind of thing that people hate on the floor. And so I'm just thinking about people yelling at us on the floor for how could we allow that? Conrad, can you actually make a note that this Federal Register thing that Amy's saying, because I think someone's going to raise this, give me an example of, and I may not remember that in June, and I would like to be able to pull that together.
Well, maybe it's an electronic case management system with a web-based portal. And maybe it's just the way I think of portals.
Okay, Matt, and then David, I see your hand disappeared, but I'll come back to you if you want to get it back up. Matt?
Yeah, I wrote the report on online systems and agency adjudication, and in studying that, we saw a lot of large adjudicative bodies use electronic case management systems, similarly to what we're discussing here, to sort of internally manage their cases. But then they may also create a portal that would link to that case management system that would allow you to submit files or arguments or that sort of thing directly into the case management system. That said, it is possible that you could have a web-based portal that would be like, hey, do you have a complaint? Do you have an inquiry? Please submit it here. And when you type it in, it'll just create an email that would be then email to the recipient in the agency without actually an electronic case management system on the back end. So I think OR is probably going to cover more bases than and.
Can I actually ask though what we're getting at here? Because I guess the kind of web-based portal you're talking about, Matt, is sort of not what I understood us to be doing. So in other words, this is not a proposal about how to submit your complaint or anything. This is about internal administration, which maybe what would we be losing if we just deleted our web-based portal? Because Amy, I guess I hear what you're saying, but I'm wondering, like, is the web-based portal a way that, for example, the Federal Register is managing the cases, or it's just something in addition?
Well, so it's a slightly different process, right? And it doesn't necessarily deal with requests. So agencies submit their documents for public processing and publication in the Federal Register through a portal now that feeds into a document management system.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just thinking of portals maybe in a different way.
Right. I guess I'm just wondering whether we need to include the web-based portal thing at all here. If what we're really talking about is just a way to manage cases individually. But this is not my area of specialty. So Nina?
Well, I was just thinking that as if you were a congressional liaison, it would be nice if the agency had some kind of portal that you could submit the information or the request to the agency through, and then what the agency does, and that's the web-based portal. And then what the agency does with that submission is, does it have a case management system to feed that request into to track internally? So they're really two different functions to me.
Yeah, but so then I guess I'm wondering whether they belong in the same recommendation, right? Because the whole, as I read what 8 is doing, it's about making sure that agencies are managing the the request properly. The portal seems to be about submission, which
it's like user interface.
Yeah. David?
That is.
Yeah, my point was on the same thing. I think that the web-based portal also helps with internal management because it systematizes the way information is submitted. So whether we mean it for internal control or external.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well then, are we recommending that everybody have both? Are we recommending that are we recommending that people, I mean, should we go up a level of generality? Should they adopt electronic systems that allow management and submission? You know, for example, such as electronic case management systems and web-based portals? Does that better capture what we're doing or not?
I think so. I mean, I think that's a solid recommendation. I would almost reverse it, because to me, again, the web-based portal is the initiation of the request.
Yeah. And I think the point of having like a higher level of generality now is to move the or to an and.
Mm-hmm.
So should adopt electronic systems such as web-based portals and electronic management systems. I don't think we can say electronic systems, and that's not the right
you know, that the technical term is case management system. And I think that maybe in the preface or somewhere you can say, when we use the term case management system, we're using it in a general sense to do any, you know, to keep track of submissions, et cetera. But
yeah,
it's
or
CMS is case management system.
But so what if then we say in line 125, should adopt electronic systems such as, and then case management systems? Could we delete the electronic there, Nina, in keeping with what you just said?
Yep.
Should adopt electronic systems such as case management systems and web-based portals.
The efficient, accurate, and timely management and resolution of requests. Just porting this language over here.
Well, no, I mean, we could, but do we even need to do that? Couldn't we just say, can't we just delete everything from that through portals? So, no, keep all that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so electronic systems such as case management systems and web-based portals to improve the, or do we need the management and submission aspect spelled out? I think I'm okay with deleting that, but I wonder if it captures well enough what people are interested in. David, I see you nodding. Amy, I see you looking. Sean, I see you smiling. Anybody have feedback in particular on this? Okay, so I think maybe should we leave it? Does anybody want this to deal with the second sentence, such systems or portals? No, I think we need to address the second, such systems and portals. Or no, even we just delete portals then.
Right, just systems.
Yeah, now we've gone up a lot. Such systems should allow agency personnel to, how about receive and manage casework requests consistent with established SOPs. I think this is fine then. We've, I think, captured without splitting paragraphs. Okay, are we good with 8 the way it stands? Okay, this is an improvement. Thank you everybody for that substantive input and wordsmithing. Okay, so new 9, in developing and modifying electronic case management systems and web-based portals, agencies should solicit feedback and suggestions for improvement from agency managers and staff and, as appropriate, congressional caseworkers. Nina, I know you were talking about getting feedback from, how'd we do? Is this, does this capture?
Yeah, I think it does. And I was thinking in my head, I don't think we need to put in, such as, a customer satisfaction, because that's putting, let them decide.
Too much direction. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. All right, so let's go to the next one then. And the next one, I think Cheryl had a recommendation. So the way it reads on the page is, when considering adoption or development of an electronic case management system or web-based portal, agencies should also consult with similarly situated agencies that may be able to share and lessons learned during their deployment and development. And so, okay, Cheryl is recommending, Cheryl, actually you're here, so why don't you explain what you're recommending?
Yeah, look, case management systems are usually off the shelf, and not even customized off the shelf, but true OTS systems, as opposed to the DDI programs, where when the federal government pays to develop it, the code can be shared across agencies. I suspect most of these CRMs are license-based, where you're not going to get the code ever. So it just didn't feel like it fit in this technology system. But if we really feel strongly we want to try and have them check about sharing the code, I would see where contractually permissible. But I think at the end of the day, that doesn't fit with the kind of systems we have here.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I guess I am comfortable with deleting what Cheryl has proposed deleting, especially because it's super specific and could perfectly well fall within the lessons learned during development and deployment, to the extent something more specific shareable would be legally and contractually permissible. So I guess I'm comfortable with this cross out, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say. Okay, I'm scrolling through. Oh, and Bernie's here. Great. Hi, Bernie. We were holding off on doing some of your proposals until you got here. So that's just great. I'm going to circle back to you in a minute. But where are we with, are we okay now with the overall deletion that Cheryl has proposed in new 10 at line 136? We're okay with that? Okay, great. So Bernie, perfect timing. I understand that you may also have to leave early, and I want to just find out how long we have you for, because I want to make sure that we are tackling your comments. Oh no, we can't hear you now. Oh, okay, I got that last little bit. You're here till the end of the meeting.
I'll try
now?
to stay until 4.
Okay, perfect. That's great. So we had decided to move forward until you got here and do the next chunk of recommendations. So I think we've now completed our work on the category of using technology to streamline request management and resolution. It seems like we're okay with that. So why don't we, Conrad, can you just scroll down? I want to see how many are in agency performance. 11, 12, 13. And then is communicating effectively with Congress the last category?
Correct.
It is. Okay. So I'm going to say, especially since Bernie's here till the end, let's keep going with our new work, and then we'll circle back to address the 2 new proposals from Bernie and a little bit the wordsmithing that some of the Committee on Style, and I think a couple of other inputs at the beginning. So let's tackle the next category, which is measuring agency performance. And so this is what's now numbered as paragraph 11. And maybe, Conrad, could you scroll so we can get A through, we can go back to Bernie's comment in a minute, but it's okay. So it's A through H. If you could just make sure that we have A through H on the screen. It's okay if you want to scroll back a little bit, Conrad, maybe. I don't think it's just how I have the screen. I think it's everybody's seeing the same thing. So, okay, perfect. So let's take a look at agencies should collect structured data that allows managers to track and evaluate as applicable. Let's read through A through H, and then let's tackle Bernie's overall comment and then Cheryl's more specific comment, and then anything else anybody wants to talk about. And I'll look for hands in a minute. Okay, so there's a bunch of suggestions in A through H that fall under the kinds of data that agencies should collect. So Bernie, why don't you explain to us your comments about what should be structured and what doesn't need to be structured?
Sure. And, maybe I don't fully understand what structured data is, but I assume it's coded in certain categories and like structured in a chart-like way. And some of this, I think it makes perfect sense to code it in that way. But for instance, trainings and other assistance agency personnel provide to members of Congress and their staffs regarding casework generally. I'm not sure how that's going to be reported in a structured data.
So your question is really about the use of the word structured, if we keep it, what exactly it means and whether it applies to everything. And so for me, that then raises the question that I'm going to throw to Sean, which is, why do we have the word structured here? Is there some sort of thing coming out of the report that you can refresh our recollection about that made this structured language kind of sensible, that you recall?
I don't believe that was my word, actually. So
okay, all right. So maybe Conrad or Matt, I'll turn to you to see if you had a sense of what the recommendation was trying to go for with structured. Because I guess my instinct is like, could we just cut it? But though,
no,
Conrad, are you speaking?
Certainly, that's an option. We could certainly just cut it. It's a term that I understand to mean data that has a standardized format to facilitate like efficient access and review by both software and human reviewers. It's kind of a term bandied about a lot in tech, but if it creates more confusion than it resolves, then yeah, I think excising it would be
great. Okay, thanks for that, Conrad. So I'll call on Jack and then John and Nina. Not to put you on the spot, but also since you were somebody who talked a little bit about using this kind of data to self-evaluate, I'd be curious to hear from you too. So
okay.
Wait, Jack, did you just you put your hand down. There you are.
So I think that I would change the words that allows to allow. I would take structured out and leave data to allow, only because I'm picky about data being a plural rather than a singular.
Yeah.
But that's one of my little foibles. Okay.
I am too. Data are. Okay, thanks for that. John?
I would opt not to delete F and G, because both of those create accountability. And you want personal accountability for tracking this stuff.
Right. Okay, I don't think we were talking about deleting the recommendations, but whether we wanted to delete the word structured. So, but I take your point about accountability. Are you okay, John, if we do delete the word structured from structured data?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And Nina, did you have a view on this?
Well, I think, you don't want to collect data like this without it being in a format that you can actually access and analyze. So
yeah, but once we have the word
applies, it does technically apply to things you can put in a grid and things like that, and training, I'm fine with data, because you're saying that what you want managers to do with it is track and evaluate.
Right. So let them figure out the best way to get at that. Okay, John, is your hand newly up or still up? Okay. That looks like it's still up. Okay, Matt. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry
you
about that. I just want to point out that we have used structured data in numerous recommendations in order to make this point, including electronic case management systems, quality assurance systems and agency adjudication, and probably online processes and agency adjudication.
Yeah, but did those also include lists that include items that don't need to be in the kinds of structured data? So I guess it's just sort of the term structure, like Bernie's asking us to think about not just the term structured data, but what are the examples of data that we want to be collecting? And I guess that's really where this is coming from. Do you recall in those recommendations whether there was like a joint list or not really?
I don't know whether any of those
okay, all right, that's fair.
Non-structured data, but I'm also not sure I'm seeing data here that could not be collected in a structured format, but I can take a closer look at it.
Okay, so back to Bernie and then to Cheryl.
Yeah, just briefly, on the congressional offices of caseworkers from which the requests originate and identities of agency personnel, is that something that would be subject to public release? And if it is, do you want to collect that data in such a easily followable form?
Are we assuming that all of this is releasable?
And I don't know the answer to that, but that.
Why wouldn't you want? I'm sorry, so waves my hand.
I'll call on you in a minute. Okay, so Bernie, but that's your question, right? Your question is about
so for
the
instance,
specific names.
Yeah, I mean, are congressional offices and caseworkers going to be comfortable with that? And is that going to cause diplomatic problems for agencies in dealing with
Conrad, could you scroll down and just remind us? So 12 is adopting performance goals. I just want to see what there is about publishing anything. Agencies should, so I don't, there's nothing in this recommendation that is about publishing anything. So I'm just gonna, to me, this looks like we are intending it to be internally directed. So that is a response to Bernie about what I think is in the four corners, but it's actually not a substantive response to Bernie's concern or a response to whether we want to actually be suggesting those data be captured. So Cheryl, David, Nina.
So my comment was gonna be a little different, but I will say that if it's FOIA-able, either way, their names are already on the emails back and forth. And if you're gonna be able to FOIA the structured or this data, you're gonna be able to FOIA. So either they get redacted everywhere or they don't. I don't know that not tracking it saves their identities. But I'm no FOIA expert. I will admit that. What I was gonna suggest is, do you want to say should collect data and then put in parentheses, and to the extent possible in a structured format, close parenthesis. And then I do think most of this, the only one I wasn't sure, I think it was Matt who said this all is structured. I don't know about the substance of the communications, whether you can do that in a structured format, but I would agree almost everything else can go into a database that's pullable through a report.
Okay. Nina?
Well, I mean, I don't know how you can effectively manage a congressional, communication program without knowing which offices are your frequent flyers, so to speak. That you may need to go out and do education of them, like these are not the appropriate issues to bring to us. They go somewhere else into another part of the agency or whatever, or to another agency. Or is there something that we can do to help your constituents understand the issue? So those are the sorts of things that you do need to track. You need to know what's coming from which congressional offices. In terms of caseworkers, as Cheryl said, those emails are going to come in, or it's going to come in your case management system, regardless who submitted it.
Great.
For some,
so you're in favor of,
I just think you have to be able to do that.
Bernie, are these responsive from Cheryl and Nina to your concern?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I just
So
wanted
then
to flag it in case it was an issue.
No, I really appreciate that. I'm glad we had this conversation. So I would suggest, I'm fine with the parenthetical to the extent possible in the structured format. I don't think the and makes sense personally, so I would delete the and. But maybe let's leave that. And if people, okay, Cheryl, I see a furrowed brow. You're not okay with that? With just leaving the and? No, you were just squinting to read at the screen. Okay. So I think then should we move to Cheryl's substantive suggestion in line or in letter D? Cheryl, do you want to explain that to us?
Yeah, when I read that, I read it, it could be one of two ways, and I think they mean it this way, but if not, we can propose different language. I think what they're saying is that you've had to keep resubmitting the same request because it was premature. Elsewhere, we talk about it being prematurely closed or not addressed properly. Or this could have been resubmitting the same kind of request, but either way, resubmit. It wasn't clear what was being resubmitted, the same request because they didn't get a satisfactory answer, or the same kind of request because they keep forgetting what the answer is. So either way, I thought we should clarify which one we mean. And I took a stab at some language thinking it was the not a satisfactory answer. But I'm not wedded to that language. I was just trying to clarify.
Okay, great. Thanks for raising that. So let's get some hands up to respond to this suggestion and comment from Cheryl. Nina?
Well, I would want to know if my employees are prematurely closing any request for any reason, not just that they didn't respond. Did they just not like the request and they closed it? I mean, I would want to be tracking where the member of Congress came back to us about that specific request. So I wouldn't have that qualifier without fully responding, but I would want to make sure that we're talking about a specific request being closed prematurely.
And do you think that prematurely itself is a word that's sufficient to encompass what you're talking about? Like, how would we define, how would agencies know what we meant by prematurely?
Well, if you wanted to include with, like without fully responding, then make it as an example. For example, for example, and then that means there are other possibilities.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think that maybe better captures and is more helpful to agencies reading this, but let's see where we are. Michael, is your hand up to respond to this?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Sorry, I didn't get to introduce myself earlier. I joined a couple of minutes late. I'm with the Federal Trade Commission, and I couldn't join the last meeting, so happy to be here today.
Welcome. We're happy to have you here.
My question was, how is an agency supposed to know precisely why the request is being resubmitted unless the congressional caseworker tells the agency like what the reason is for the resubmission? So I think I would think, if we're going to include the cause, and it should maybe refer to like the reason that the congressional caseworker told the agency. Otherwise, I just don't know how the agency could keep track of it. So
are you like, would a word like resubmit the same request?
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, Michael, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just adding language that maybe was captured. Okay, great.
I think that
okay, so let's get Sean, Bill, and Bernie in if you're all talking about this same line. So Sean, let's start with you.
Yeah, the most common reason that these seemed to be closed out and it was frustrating congressional caseworkers was because the agency person working on it had a quick trigger finger closing the account when they didn't get all the documents as quickly as they wanted. And so that was frustrating that they had to keep opening up cases. And so that was the example that I have in the paper.
Okay. I'm wondering if then do we need the for example comes before the because, right? Like because what you're saying is that the most common example. No, maybe that's not true. Maybe you're still talking about the without fully they prematurely closed it because of the lack of documentation or whatever. Okay, so I don't think you're proposing a change. You're just sort of explaining the genesis of the. Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thanks, Sean. Bill.
I'm coming to this in total ignorance, but as I read it, as I read it now, the frequency with which members of Congress and their staffs resubmit the same request because of premature closing, but if they resubmit the request for other reasons, we're not going to track it. Because it's only if it's because it's been permanently prematurely closed that we're going to track it. I thought that for example, should come before because the agency prematurely closed a previous request, as saying that that's a likely, maybe the most likely reason, but it's not the exclusive reason. I mean, I assume you'd want to know the frequency with which they resubmit the same request for any reason.
Yeah. So then maybe we don't even need the without fully responding to the caseworker's inquiry, but then it should just be resubmit the same request, comma, for example, because the agency prematurely closed the
That's
request.
what I would suggest.
That's what, okay, that is sort of what I was getting at, but I kind of lost the thread of it. So, okay, so let's see comments with to this latest proposed change. Bernie.
Yes, so with the same provision, so if a request is resubmitted because 6 months later there's additional information that the caseworker has, and so they want a reevaluation of the same situation, is that the same request or is that a new request? And it would seem to me that if we wanted to track that as a resubmission, that would be another reason other than premature closure by the agency. And so I would think that there might be other reasons in addition to the example that we're given. And for that reason, I might add what was suggested earlier, not only the frequency with which members resubmit, but also the reasons for resubmission. And I would assume that the agency could come up with whatever categories it wanted and a miscellaneous category to kind of put that in a structured format.
Okay, so comma after request. But I'm now realizing that we deleted Cheryl's specific proposed addition. So we had, like, because the agency prematurely closed a previous request as an example, and one example of that is without fully responding to the caseworker's inquiry. So maybe we should put that maybe we should put that deleted language without fully responding to the caseworker's inquiry back there, but then keep Bernie's new language. So all we've done then post Bill's input is just changed where the for example is, and now we've added Bernie's suggestion about reasons for the resubmission. Okay, so those are the two. This is the sentence that we currently have on the table. Amy, let me call on you.
It would be good if we added something that so that the caseworkers notify the agencies that it's they consider it a resubmission, because we were just talking about if the caseworker gets more documents 6 months later and then submits it to the agency might count it as a new request, but the caseworker.
Yeah, in the communications with Congress section, Conrad, no, it's down below. do we have anything about requests from that caseworkers give to? We don't. We only have communication out. We don't have requests for communication in. I don't know what to do with that. So Amy's point is really we should be asking, like agencies should ask Congress to do a certain thing when it's submitting these requests, but we don't have any other examples of that, I think. And I'm not sure how people would like to respond to this idea. Nina?
Well, I think those are internal agency procedures. And my experience with asking Congress to do anything to make our jobs easier were met with not a lot of cooperation. So, you know, we sometimes would designate it as a reopen of a case, sometimes because it was, you know, it presented such new evidence that we made it a new case, you know. And I think that's just left to the agencies to decide now. Yeah.
Okay, Amy, is that responsive to your concern?
I mean, I don't know how they would do that. Like if you have a web portal, you could put, you know, I'm submitting, let's forget about a case, you know, I'm submitting this issue or I'm submitting something. And you can say, you can put in the text box, I've already submitted this before, and here is the number of that previous submission. You know, you could ask people to do that in the instructions for the web portal. But that's not structured data that's going to
yeah.
be.
And that's why I was thinking about the communications with Congress. I mean, we don't have anywhere, we are not proposing agency best practices for what they should be asking for from Congress. And I guess I feel like your suggestion, Amy, I get it and it makes sense to me, but I don't think we have a section for that here. And I hear Nina saying we shouldn't have a section for that here. I guess I'm wondering if other people have any reaction to this kind of back and forth between Amy and Nina on whether to propose that agencies ask for certain things.
Well, let me clarify that. I mean, and I think this goes back to, I can't remember who said this, but the whole point of the web portal is also to, you know, nudge the submitters to provide us the information that the agency wants. And so design a web portal to capture that have you submitted this issue to us before? But then to make it really useful, it has to be asked in a way that, you know, the agency can search, can analyze it. I mean, I would put that on the agency designs a web portal so that it gets the information that it wants. And if it wants this information.
Can we go back up to the web portal recommendation then, Conrad? I'm looking to just see if there's anything. Do we want to add something here about like agencies should consider what information they request congressional caseworkers submit to them as part of requests, comma, which may include resubmission, blah, blah, blah. I mean, is this getting too detailed, or is this the kind of thing we should be veering towards? I just don't know what current practice is. So maybe, okay, David, but then maybe Sean, if you have a view on this from your report, that would be great. David?
Yeah, I just think, I mean, we're in a section where we're talking about measuring agency performance, and we're already very specifically giving them certain measures that we think are important for them to track, but they probably also have a sense for what's important for them to track. And so I'm reluctant to be too specific about what performance measures they should adopt. And if we're going to ask them to, you know, I think for me, it'd be sufficient just to say, you know, how many cases are resubmissions and let them work out the details of how they want to figure that out, rather than say too much more, because they're going to collect other data as well. And
Right,
the way that
consistent with
data is
age.
collected is going to change, right? The kinds of measures they're going to use are going to change. They're always sort of in flux. And so I'm reluctant to go into too much detail here, other than say, here are some good ideas, and do some other things as well.
So David, that makes sense to me about measuring agency performance, which is why I was trying to, if we were going to try to capture this idea of like, we should ask Congress to tell agencies certain things, why I was trying to get it out of agency performance and up to where we were discussing the web portal. Do you have the same reaction up there?
Yeah, I mean, my
Or, like,
thought is just in practice, and other people can weigh in here, that if the measure that we have is how many of these are resubmissions, then what that does is it sort of sends a signal like, let's check what's going on here that's wrong. And that's sufficient. I honestly, I think it was fine the way it was. I wouldn't put in additional information above for the web portal or get too specific about what that looks like, partly because agencies are so different and they collect different kinds of information.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. I'm trying to find some way to capture the nub of Amy's concern without derailing the focus of either of these sections. So
Maybe I need to restate my concern. My concern is, how do agencies know it's a resubmission? I mean, I understand tracking it, but I just not.
yeah. So one way that I understand what David is saying is that if we are suggesting to agencies that they be tracking resubmissions, they will find some way of collecting that information, whether it's changing the instructions they put on their portals, or whether it's calling the caseworker to say, is this a resubmission or whatever, like leaving it general enough because agencies are so different. So that's how I understood David's, okay, and I see thumbs up from David. So is that responsive, Amy?
It is. It puts a lot of onus on
Pressure on the agencies. Yeah. Okay. Well, are there other folks? Amy, remind me where you're coming from.
I'm a senior fellow, but I'm at the FTC right now.
Okay, the FTC. Are there other agency folks who have a reaction to the pressure that Amy's talking about on agencies, maybe from agencies? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. I think my instinct is to leave it this way for now, Amy, and we can circle back when we have if there's time, maybe let's circle back on this today, but I think I'm not hearing a ton of support for adding further clarifications here. So I think I'm inclined to leave it as is.
When you
okay,
say
so and leave it with the way that we've now wordsmithed that now captures all of the additions that we have made. So yes, thank you so much for clarifying, Conrad. I would hate to lose all of that work. So I think we've responded to Cheryl's. Are you getting rid of comments along the way once we deal with them? Yeah. Okay. So I think we've resolved that. Okay. Is there anything else that people want to comment on in recommendation 11 before we leave it? We've changed staff to caseworkers. I think that's a consistent change throughout from the Committee on Style.
No objections?
Okay. All right. So I'm hearing that we should move to recommendation 12. So Conrad, if you want to scroll us so that we can see that. Agencies should adopt performance goals. And for each goal, objective measures. Okay. And where it says recommendation 9, I think this now means recommendation 11. So let's take a look at that and then I'll look for hands. Okay, I'm looking for hands. Conrad, I'll just note that the Committee on Style seems not to have changed staffed here in line 162 to caseworkers, and I'm wondering if that was intentional. Apparently it was not. Okay, as a member of the committee on staff, I did not recall possibly committee. Okay. All right, so as a matter of substance, what are people's views on adopting performance goals and objective measures to leverage the data that we just talked about? David, any thoughts?
I can live with it as it is. It's just odd to recommend a series of measures without identifying what the goals are in advance. Normally what we do is identify goals and then set measures that are attached to those goals. I'm assuming that we are doing that because we have an idea what those goals are likely to be, but that's just me.
So would your idea be then that we would be setting the goals, or that we would tell agencies, I mean, we're sort of telling them to adopt goals?
Yes, the reason I didn't say anything was because I can't imagine a set of goals that didn't involve using those measures. It just that we're sort of, that's so I retract anything. I'm not making a recommendation on tech.
Yeah. Okay, I hear you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one way, am I actually going to suggest putting something on the table? But I mean, one way that we could capture some of that would be to have agencies adopting performance goals first and then be suggesting the data, right? Like we could flip the numbers of 11 and 12. How do people think about that? Yes, no? Jack?
Yeah, I had a question about this one as I read it. Is this supposed to be a general agency should adopt performance goals suggestion? Or is this supposed to be a agency should adopt performance goals with regard to their response to constituent, casework?
Yes, obviously the latter,
like
which is obviously not textually reflected.
Because this reads
So,
like
yes.
something you would just, this reads like something you would just
Jack.
say to every agency, like
So
in,
true.
with quality management
Yeah.
injunction. Or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Eloise, I was going to support your effort. Just move this paragraph up, and then the kinds of performance measures that we recommend flow theoretically from the goals that they're likely to set for their performance management systems.
Yeah. Okay, so then we will make what is currently 12, 11. We'll just flip the order of that. And then our suggestion for the data to collect help suggest some goals that they might be setting without being too directive about it. Okay. And then let's go. Bernie, are you putting a hand up by going off mute? I mean, like you went off mute. No? Okay. Yeah, you didn't mean to. Okay, great. Okay, so then I think we're fine, unless anybody wanted to look more at the wordsmithing of that paragraph that we just moved. Okay, so I think I'm not hearing anything. So let's keep 11 where it is, as it is. And now we have to go to 14. So agencies should evaluate on an ongoing basis whether they're meeting performance goals. I assume we want to add the same kind of limitation here that Conrad just added in response to Jack's comments about these are not generalized performance goals. Conrad, do you want to grab that language that you used up in what's now 12? Did I freeze? Can you hear me? You can hear me okay? Okay, Conrad, did Conrad possibly freeze? Matt, are you, I can see you. I think Conrad got locked out. Ooh, what fun. Okay. Matt, are you able to take over? Or do you not have, is there not like some sort of fancy pants internal ACUS system?
I can take over. Let me quickly check on the back end, Conrad, and see how he is doing.
Okay. I mean, like we could take our break, but ideally I would like to get through this chunk before we do.
Let me quickly open the document.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bill, here I am reminded of the time when I conked out my internet, and Bill, you took over chairing for 10 minutes or whatever until I was able to get back. So team effort, we're gonna make this work. Jack, I see your hand up. Are you prepared to say something while we do not have text in front of us?
Yeah, I did. I just, when we get back to this, it seems to me that that 11 maybe this new, whatever the new 11 maybe, I don't know if it's now 12. I can't remember the numbering. This one looks a little bit redundant of the prior one. Maybe I'm looking at where it says agencies should evaluate on an ongoing basis whether they're meeting performance goals and is appropriate and so on. The one we just moved up already had that they should reassess.
Yeah,
so I'm
let's take
concerned
a
that
look
there's
at what
some
the language is.
redundancy here when we get back to it. I just take a look at the redundancy is what my suggestion, I guess.
Okay, that's a great point. So Matt's gonna get us back in. Thank you so much, Matt.
No problem. Remind me where
we can
we're
think
seeing
about
your
Matt,
messages and your Spotify.
Yeah.
Can we have some background music also?
I know.
I thought
Spotify.
I clicked the right thing, but I clicked the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to know what to share.
I also have it up too, so that's easier.
Oh, okay. Kasia, that's right.
Okay, you got it?
All right, yeah.
Yeah, so let's go down to, we're in like 12, 11, 13, right around there. So, okay, so here's where we were. So hold on. So Jack just pointed out now that could you freeze for a sec? Let's look at what's now 11.
Sorry, guys. We just temporarily lost internet here at ACUS offices, but I am now back up online and ready to take back over if that would be
great. Okay. Hello, Conrad. Welcome back. Glad to see you. Thank you, Matt, for stepping in.
Yeah, really, that was bizarre. I've never had that happen before, but
lucky you. I'm pretty sure everybody is feeling very empathetic with our own experiences. Okay, so let's go back. Jack was just suggesting that maybe we now have some redundancy between what we're about to start talking about number 14 in line 170 and what we just moved up to be 12. So could you just kind of take us to, or I guess it's 11 now. Agencies should adopt performance goals, and then the second sentence, agencies periodically should reassess performance goals, measures, and associated data to ensure they continue to reflect operational realities, blah, blah. Okay, so that's about assessing the goals themselves. And then we talked about 12, what they should be collecting data on. Let's go to 13. So Jack, your question is whether it's redundant, and I don't actually think it is, because 14 is now about meeting performance goals, whereas new 12 is about what the performance goals should be. What do you think? Jack? I'm hearing radio silence.
Yeah, I see the difference. I guess it just seems a little awkward to me that it's separated by the
right.
by the long list in new number 12. But yeah, no, I think that yeah, I mean it's not, you're right that it's not redundant. I guess it's just what hit me was because it's separated by number 12. It seems like the second half of new number 11 seems more consistent with, seems to belong more with what's in new number. I guess it's going to be 13 because the 13 one is all deleted now. But yeah, it's fine. No reason to touch it. Don't
Okay,
make work
so
when
let's-
there's no need.
Yeah, okay, so let's keep it as it is. So I think then we're good with this trio. So now we have them back and forth between Bernie and Jack. And so Bernie, why don't we start with you, and then Jack will go to your comment, and then we'll kind of figure out where we are as a committee.
Okay, I just first wanted to remind you that when Conrad froze, you were actually talking about moving language from paragraph 11 to duplicated in 13 to make sure that we weren't talking about all performance goals, but performance goals regarding.
Thank you so much. I was doing that indeed. Boy, I appreciate that. I love ACUS. This is just the best collection of everything. So thank you for that. Okay, so Conrad, you've got that? Yes, perfect. Okay, Bernie.
All right, so my suggestion here, let's see, I'm make sure I know where I am here, but I think this was yeah, so some of this looks like it's lined out or something, but so the
So I think
congressional.
that's Jack's suggestion, is lining it out. So why don't you just tell us what your
Okay.
suggestion
All right, so
was?
so basically there was some suggestion about whether we should suggest to agencies that the results of their analysis of their metrics and how they were met might reveal some systematic problems. And there was a question initially about, should we address that? I thought we should address that, and this was basically a suggestion for how to implement that. So explaining why it would be that considering deficiencies revealed by having to do casework requests might actually benefit the agency in reducing the volume of casework, make it so that the agency operated properly and wouldn't have to rely on casework requests, particularly for people who would never make a casework request. And then to just suggest that that's what agencies do. They should look at these indicators of congressional inquiry requests to see whether there's either broader policy issues or broader procedural hurdles that would improve agency performance while at the same time actually reducing the number of casework requests. So that was I think the basic point. I have to apologize because I didn't have a chance to read Jack's comments, so I'm not exactly sure what they are. So I guess maybe I'll have to respond to them to some extent after
Sure.
Jack.
Okay. So that's sort of what you were doing with trying to gesture towards this additional paragraph. So let me go to Jack, and then I'll go to Bill. So Jack, you were just suggesting take out everything but the middle sentence, right?
Yeah, I think that everything but the sentence that's now in pink is preamble language, and that the sentence in pink is the only real recommendation language. I actually 100% agree with what Bernie says in the language that is stricken out, but maybe it belongs as the last or second to last material in the preamble. That's my main point.
So let's go to Bill.
Yeah.
Let's go to Bill, and then I'll circle back to Bernie.
My point was I felt exactly the same as Jack when I read it.
Okay, great. So unless I hear to the contrary, I think I'm going to suggest, well, Bernie, let's see if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me. I'm not.
Yeah, perfect. So then it seems like we can just focus on the actual recommendation language in the recommendation. And so Conrad, could you delete that language, but let's save it so that we can see, maybe it's already replicated in the preamble. I don't think it is though, because it's new stuff from Bernie. Yep. So Cheryl, let me call on you.
Yeah, I'm debating whether we need to be a little more specific that either agency management or agency senior officials. So in other words, I think it needs to be at a level in the agency that can effectuate change.
Yeah.
Whereas so in other words, making it clear that this isn't the people responding to the casework themselves or even their supervisors who are trying to make sure that those responders are being efficient. This is someone
Yeah.
else in the agency who can actually make those changes.
And so here I want to go to Matt serving in Jeremy's role. How do we handle this, right? Like, this is not the only time we do this. We respond to a point like Cheryl's point, which is that we have like a specific targeted group of agency leaders or something like that. Do we have standard language that we do with that?
I wouldn't
Matt?
say we have standard language for doing that. Sometimes we will set it aside with a header that will sort of specify that this is targeted at a specific individual, but I can certainly.
I see. Okay, I don't think we need to do that. I think Cheryl's point is sensible here, that, and I think it belongs in this subcategory too, right? Which is, but I could like, let's hear some comment on that. But so what if we just add agency, I would say senior agency officials maybe, or oh no, whatever, Conrad, whatever you were putting in. I was just choosing between Cheryl's two proffered nouns.
And senior agency officials.
That makes sense to me. But I would like to hear from some other people about that header, who not header, but like title. Who should we be addressing this to? Are people okay with senior agency officials? Or is there something else people would like to propose there? Okay, I'm scrolling through names. I see a thumbs up from Nina. Thank you, Nina. I don't see anybody raising a hand, so I think we'll keep it like that. Okay, so there's one thing so I think then we're set with this set of recommendations. We still have to do communicating effectively with Congress. Oh, David, let me call on you before I transition.
Sorry, just really quick. I wonder if we could just recommend for the Committee on Style an overall quick, like offline, looking at the overall structure of this section in terms of the way that we present goals, checking on goals, performance measures, reassessing those goals, just to make sure they're all sort of flows in the right direction. I think there's a little bit of unease about the overall structure, but I think that's a Committee on Style thing rather than it is a substantive.
Okay.
And maybe we keep it the same, but yeah.
Well, that is a helpful reminder of a structural thing for the Committee on Style to double check. There's one thing that I realized as we were transitioning between who had internet and who didn't have internet that we didn't, a question we didn't respond to in the thing before this subsection. And I would just like to just do that super quickly before we take a 5-minute break. So can you just go back up? I noticed that we didn't respond right there to Conrad. We didn't respond to that question. So we've resolved that comment from Bernie, but we didn't. This is in we talked about Cheryl's comments about how, I'm at line 134, sorry, I'm too much in my head here, recommendation 10. We talked about Cheryl's comment about not sharing data, but we didn't respond to Conrad's question about whether we should recommend that any particular entity, like maybe GSA, should coordinate information sharing. And in this, I'll just note that OMB has declined to like really weigh in on this interaction. So on this recommendation rather. So I think should not be the focus of whoever, if we wanted to come up with a coordination body. Does anybody have any input, I guess, in response to Conrad's question in the margin? Should we target any particular entity, or are we comfortable with just saying no? Agencies should consult with similarly situated agencies, period. Bill?
Well, I have to say that I thought OMB's rejection we're not interested was a little terse, a little non-responsive. I mean, we asked them for information and they said, we're not interested, go away. My suggestion is we should put them in here as OMB should be the ones who do this, all right? And then give them a chance to comment on why they shouldn't be. I mean, because there may be good reasons why they shouldn't, but they didn't give them. They just said, we're not interested. And I found that sort of a slap in the face. So I don't know if I'm just being crazy here, but I sort of like the idea of saying OMB, or at least somebody should, and maybe OMB, all right, should do that and let them address it on their own.
Okay, other reactions to either Bill's provocative suggestion or Conrad's narrower marginal note? John, you were the one who mentioned OMB in the beginning. We're going to circle back to that after we finish communicating with Congress. I don't know if you want to weigh in here.
Well, on reflection, I thought that OMB's response was probably from the political side of the House, where the media would claim this as White House is trying to control agency communications with the Congress. So I think that I can understand why OMB just said no.
Okay, Bernie.
So when we were working on the proactive disclosure project, is I discovered there's this committee of computer experts that essentially coordinated computer matters across the federal government. And I can look back at the report to try to figure out what committee or council that was, unless someone on the call.
Is it 18F?
I'm sorry, what?
18F or something like that? No?
I don't think that's who it was.
I don't think that's what I'm thinking of. But
yeah. Bernie, I had asked a similar question in response to Conrad's thing. I had also a recollection that some previous thing that I had worked on for ACUS about technology also involved some interagency consortium of blah, 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 blah. And we were unable to track down exactly what my vague recollection was. So maybe we should make this point though, like an ACUS back check, double scrub before we come back next time. Amy, and then depending on what Amy says, maybe we close this out for this particular question. Oh, and Cheryl.
So they do have a CIO council that I think is headed by GSA. So all the, the technology people get together and talk about things. GSA has also done like interagency working groups on PKI.
What's PKI?
The public key infrastructure, so you can digitally sign documents and it can be checked. So that might be an option. Otherwise, like GSA's old 18F would charge agencies to help them build websites. So maybe, or regs.gov also charges. So maybe those types of things, if that's what you had in mind, will probably agencies will be less likely to want to.
Yeah, I don't think we were thinking of a charging thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Cheryl, thanks for those tips though, Amy. Cheryl?
So the Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2019, I thought charged OMB to set up some, every agency has to have a chief data officer, a chief tech officer, and a chief security officer. And I thought that OMB had to have some kind of council either for all those people or each of those people. So I do think that may be what you guys are thinking about, something based out of that. Anyway, just another place to look when you guys are trying to figure out what that group might be.
Okay. Let me ask just like a macro question though now. I am actually perfectly comfortable with leaving line 135 as agencies should consult and letting agencies themselves figure out how they want to consult and if there's some sensible organization that they can consult with. So I am not advocating that we get a little more specific. I was just throwing out other things in response to the question that really stemmed on the ACUS side from whether we wanted to call anybody out. So what I guess I'm hearing is, well, am I hearing, does anybody think we need to call it anything more specific? Or the suggestions that Conrad just wrote down here are for, if we do want to go more specific, where to look? Jack?
I have a slightly different point, but I don't think there's a reason to be any more specific unless we had specific ideas of good resources. But I'm wondering whether 10 could be folded in as a second part of 9, because it's the same point, just a different audience. So what if you added congressional and as appropriate congressional caseworkers and some other similarly situated agencies?
Well, I think it is actually different because feedback and suggestions is like, how am I doing? Who's the mayor who, right? Like, how am I doing? Whereas 10 is really, we're thinking about doing this. Hey, friend in other agency, tell me what you learned. Like, to me, those are two different things.
Okay, I just, because of the word developing in number 9 led me to believe it was all the same. It was included the same, but I get it.
Yeah, I actually might, David, I was just going to say, this makes me think of David's other suggestion that we think about the order in which we do things, because maybe we actually want to flip 9 and 10. I don't know if that's what David was going to say. But anyway, to me, that also is a committee on style kind of thing. So I would be prepared for that. But so maybe Conrad, if you want to make a note of that, and let me call on David, and then I think we should take, people are chatting me. Okay, good. I see the chat. Thank you so much. David, Lewis, and then I think we probably should take a break.
Thanks. I'll make this quick. This is more just as a friendly suggestion. If we want them to look outside to agencies other than ones that are similarly situated, we could say similarly situated agencies or units that have particular expertise, and kind of leave it at that. That leaves them to GSA or to something like that.
Great. I think that nicely captures what we're doing. Okay, so I would like to take a 5-minute break now. Actually, let's just come back at 2:40 because that's cleaner. Let's come back at 2:40 and we will finish the last chunk. And then it is my very strong goal to go back and finish the first chunk that we first got to last time. So let us try to be super efficient and purposive as we do this. So I will see everybody back here at 2:40. And thanks for your work thus far. Okay, great. So I think we've wrapped up now measuring agency performance subject to the Committee on Style scrub for the usual things, including structure. And now, so communicating effectively with Congress, if memory serves, is the last of the new things. So we have to get 15, 16, 17, 18, and then we will circle back. Please, we will circle back and wrap up where we were last time, which also now has 2 new proposals. So let's be on top of that. But okay, so we're now in the section called Communicating Effectively with Congress, and we have 15, which looks like an addition. Conrad, can you remind us why 15 is an addition here?
Yeah, certainly. Well, you could read the comment or I could read it for you. Basically, at the end of the last meeting, we had added a parenthetical to one of the items within the suggested content of the SOPs that effectively urged agencies to include within each communication an identification of any applicable legal constraints on the agency's ability to provide the information or assistance requested. And given that it was not speaking to the content of the SOPs, thought it would be more appropriate if that recommendation was moved down here, given that it affects communication with Congress.
Great. My recollection is, though, that we did not purposefully make this number 15. We just were dropping it into this section. Correct. Okay, great. So I guess, I'm a little bit reluctant then to start with 15 because it doesn't look like it's going to be the lead one for this section. So can we maybe go to, let's start with 16 and then we'll figure out what we want to do with the order. So, okay, Jack, thank you for being here, and we have you for 15 more minutes. So feel free to raise your hand should you want to. I'm responding to Jack's chat. Okay, so agencies should foster strong working relationships. I'm in 16, line 175, with congressional caseworkers and maintain open lines of communication. And then there's suggestions for how to foster such relationships. So let's take a look at 16A through E, and we'll walk through what people's comments are. Carol, I see we have a specific one from you that I'll turn to you shortly, but let's get the general scope first. Okay, so comments, suggestions. Okay, not hearing any general comments or suggestions or like in response to the idea itself. So maybe let's go to Cheryl, your specific suggestion, which is at line 185, about the option for fostering relationships that would include organizing trainings or events.
Yeah, my only point about this was I think the next one talks about group trainings, and talks a little bit about, doing it in large chunks. There are so many government agencies that the idea that every government agency is going to do this with congressional staff, with staff turnover at Congress, and it just feels like it's a sinking ship to me. And so the question became like, should there be a recording that someone can watch instead when they're going, or some kind of, I said, a group that does a bunch of them at the same time, but that seems to be D, or maybe it's a job aid. But do we really, how many agencies? I don't even mean departments. I mean agencies, sub-agencies within departments are there in the executive branch that we really think every single one of them is going to be able to do some kind of interactive with Congress on a frequent enough basis to deal with staff turnover? That feels aggressive.
Where did this come from? Sean, is this coming from something in the report?
It is. The one of the things that the congressional staff was looking for were more opportunities to interact with the caseworkers, or the people working in the agencies. And also for, the people we spoke to at agencies looking for opportunities. They felt as though there were fewer questions and fewer problems when there was greater training of the congressional staff. So we were trying to get at, pushing for more of that. Some agencies clearly were doing a lot of training and some not so much. Some of that made a lot of sense given the size and the amount of casework that they were doing. But yeah, that's the general thrust.
Cheryl, does that assuage any of the concerns, or would an as appropriate or consistent with capacity, or?
I was going to say, maybe if it's a qualifier of agencies that receive a large quantity of casework from an office or group of offices could offer this. But if you're saying every agency should do this, or maybe at the department level they should do it, it's just, coming from DOL, there were 13 sub-agencies, all managed it a little differently. That's just one department.
So Cheryl, up in line 178, it's not a recommendation for what to do. It's a list of possible options. Did that satisfy the concern, or should that even be, would you prefer to have that even weaker? Like options might include, or organizing trainings or events.
I think
to be grammatically consistent, we can't actually start with that, but we could put this, sorry, in C, yeah, the agencies,
but
we could do that in a parenthetical after.
Sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
So what I'm thinking though is like some of these I think every agency should do, right? I do think every agency should have a point of contact. I do think there should be a website where they can access the SOPs, right? So some of these I do think go to every agency. So I don't want to make it seem like some of these are optional when or more optional than they are for smaller agencies. I think the big training really would be limited, like individualized training. This group training, I think, makes sense in D, but for an agency just to set up a training, I think you've got to be one like the IRS or, you know, ones that are Social Security, the ones that give out benefits that are probably routinely turning these through. I don't know that you want this for like, you know, the EEOC. I don't know. It just seems like there are a lot of agencies that sometimes get casework and there are a lot of agencies that always get casework.
Okay, so I think I see a bunch of hands up that are probably responsive to this point. So let's stay on this point. Bernie.
I just had a technical comment on something else involved in this paragraph, so I'll pass until.
Okay, let me come back to you for that. Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, I meant to also say that there's two real thrusts here that, you know, make these trainings valuable. One is just transferring information and getting the caseworkers who are often new, because there's a lot of turnover, up to speed. The other one is building personal relationships. One thing that I would suggest is that it would be wonderful if there were training videos or something like that available on the website that just give the information so it isn't given over and over again. But that would not allow for the building of personal relationships. So I'll defer to the committee on your thoughts.
I mean, we could have an additional recommendation that is not about the relationships, but it's just about information sharing, which also I think could fall under the communications with Congress. Okay, let's go to Nina.
So when I testified, I can't remember what year it was, in 2022 or something, before the House Select Committee on Modernization of Congress or whatever. Something that really resonated with them was what the Taxpayer Advocate Service does. But I think, to Cheryl's point, for many small agencies, you can't reproduce that. But it really resonated with them because there is so much staff turnover in the caseworker office, in the congressional offices, that we would have our local staff go out and, when there was turnover, reach out to them and just walk them through how to submit requests to us. That was self-preservative in a way, because we didn't want people to send us stuff that we didn't think we could handle, and we wanted it to come in the form that we wanted it to. But to Sean's point, it was personal. But I think at the very least, since, you know, most organizations don't have that geographic structure like we did, that the very least is creating a training that can be available online, that's defining your own procedures, what you want the caseworkers to, how you want it to be submitted, best practices, most common errors, you know, those kinds of things that can be watched by the new caseworker. And then you build on that to, you know, try to do as much, you know, maybe hold once a year, like just what they're saying, an organized training or event where people can tune in virtually and discuss with you. So I have actually no problem with this proposal, except to maybe put in, you know, you've said already, you know, I just think doing it virtually, but you could also write something about, including a recorded training for new hires or something like that, to reduce a little pressure on agencies.
And do you think that would be in the same subsection C, or do you think it would be a different one?
I don't know. You're sort of mixing things like learn to use and provide user experience feedback on any web-based portal. To me, that lends itself to a recorded training. And then you've got an event or a training where you're having interaction with the agency personnel and sharing concerns about the procedures and stuff like that. So I've made break them out as two things. One is, training for congressional personnel to learn how to use the portals and, the types of requests that should be submitted. And then the second thing would be organizing trainings or events, virtually or in person, where caseworkers can interact with agency personnel and, share their experience with the tool.
Okay.
Although above, we've already said, go out to the congressional offices and ask how they are experiencing your tools. So I'm not sure that you I'm not being very helpful. I'm just.
Well, one way of, David, I'm going to call on you in a sec, so thanks for getting your hand up. And Bernie, I see you too now. One thing that we could maybe do is we could insert between B and C a new C that would be creating trainings, either recorded or live or whatever. I don't exactly know how to capture the virtual or in-person aspect. At which, and then we would cut and paste from learn until the end, really.
Yeah, and I would say providing rather than creating trainings or conducting trainings.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. That's better. So conducting trainings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's do that. And then we could massage D to be, let's take out trainings then here and just make this events. So organizing events held virtually or in person in Washington, D.C. and regionally, at which caseworkers can interact with agency personnel. And then we should probably say and where appropriate, any of the items in this training recommendation. I don't know how to wordsmith that. But so just sort of to try to separate them, but integrate them where it would make sense. Okay, so that's one way of trying to capture Cheryl's concern and Nina's input, but let's go to David and then Bernie now.
Thanks. I was just going to reemphasize something that Cheryl said, which is that I think back when I did casework, there were about 5 agencies that were responsible for 90% of the cases. And I think that making a recommendation that said, organizing training or events, if an agency is a high volume receiver of requests, might sort of distinguish the big agencies from the small agencies. I think that an efficient way to talk about taping or not taping would just be virtual or in-person, synchronous and asynchronous, which would, I think, capture the idea of taping events or, trainings. And it also helps focus on the big cases rather than the small cases. So I don't know what Cheryl thinks about that, but that was sort of in the spirit of her suggestion.
And David, were you suggesting that particularly with what's now carved out as D, or is there also some virtue? Are you suggesting sort of recollapsing them, or are you okay with having C the way it is now? Would you propose that C also have the same qualification for the high volume receiver? What's your view on those developing possibilities?
The original suggestion was for the original language, but I'm sure we could work with the new suggestion as well and, find a solution. So I was just trying to find efficient language to capture both Cheryl's and Nina's points. So.
Okay. Bernie?
Yeah, so I have another suggestion on this that would allow maybe these two now C and D to be collapsed, which
Okay.
is to start off essentially what is now D with providing and then trainings or events, and then so it's the same as before, and then held virtually or in person or recorded. And then continue on. So that was an attempt to try to, instead of having two paragraphs, try to encompass everything in one. I'm agnostic to the addition of if an agency is a high volume receiver of requests. I mean, I'm certainly sympathetic to the concern with regard to small agencies, but I suspect that having a recorded training may not be that much of a burden even on small agencies. But as I say, I'm agnostic to that.
Okay. So then this is maybe suggesting that we recollapse, right? Like I think the thrust of the last couple has been maybe with the addition of the modification of virtually in person or recorded. And maybe if we include the high volume receiver request, that we could bring back down my effort to separate them out. But let's go to Cheryl to see her reaction to how this is unfolding.
I like how it's unfolding. Sorry, I have to find the mute button. I like how it's unfolding. I think part of the challenge feels like we're trying to do two things. One, educate congressional staff, and two, create the feedback loop. And so I wonder if we break it out where I like that sentence that Bernie provided and taking out, yeah, and then have a second sentence that says that I would take out the parentheses of a high volume of receiver requests, because I think all the agencies can do a recording that's kind of like a helpful on how to submit a request, but that we ought to say if an agency is a high volume receiver of requests, it should consider doing these live or virtually on a regular basis to enable not only the training of congressional staff, but also feedback from congressional caseworkers, I think is the term we're using, on how the process is working or whatever the right words are. And then that way you, one, have the training from every agency in a bunch of different ways that make sense for their level of interaction with Congress. But then it allows for what Sean was talking about of that feedback loop for the 10%, who is it, whatever was said, 10 agencies that do 90% of the casework. Do you see that? And maybe that's too fine a distinction.
Okay, so like there's a grammatical thing about how we fit it in, but let me just make sure that I get the substance of it. I don't think we have the substance yet on the screen. So if an agency is a high volume receiver of requests, they should consider, and we'll grammar later, they should consider holding live trainings and events. But then what was the rest of the stuff? And are you prepared, Conrad? I don't see you up on the screen, but can you type as she's
So I'm
speaking?
not looking at the
Okay.
camera because I've moved it to a larger monitor, so bear with me. So
That's
providing
okay.
training or events held virtually in person or recorded, I would take out the if an agency is high volume. I think you can take out held virtually or in person because it's in which agency personnel can provide training regarding submitting and managing requests and the kinds of assistance the agency can and cannot provide in response to requests. So that's
so how
mm-hmm.
Sorry, Cheryl, I didn't mean to cut you off.
So that would be the training piece. Then the next sentence would be for those agencies that frequently receive a high volume of caseload or requests from caseworkers, whatever you want to say, comma, or take out the for. Those agencies that receive a high volume of casework requests should consider doing these live or virtually on a regular basis to also receive, and that's where we get the provide user feedback piece. So every agency should have a training mechanism, live, virtual, or recorded. But only the big agencies should then figure out a way to interact on a regular basis with caseworkers to get the feedback loop that way and create the relationship Sean's talking about.
Okay.
Did I
So many things.
overcomplicate this too much?
No, you didn't. I just think we have too many things floating around on the screen now. So I was trying to separate out trainings and events, but I think you're trying to separate out high volume and not high volume, and the distinction between like basic. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. So I was trying to say, I don't know that if our goal is interaction and relationship building in both directions, that probably only matters for those 10 agencies that have 90% of casework.
Mm-hmm.
But a caseworker having a resource to go to learn how to submit the complaint is for any agency they're going to submit for. And that's what I'm trying to solve for here.
So then I think we need to cut what I had proposed as C. So like just cut that because I think it's back. So reject that insertion. The providing trainings or events held virtually, in person, or recorded. Maybe let's cut in Washington, D.C. and regionally and put it after in person. Within the comma. And then we can wordsmith, but just get it right there. Okay, at which agency personnel can provide training regarding submitting and managing requests and the kinds of assistance the agency can and cannot provide in response to requests. I think that has to be a new recommendation because it needs to be like structurally. So this is now where I'm thinking about David's. What was that suggestion about high volume? I mean, it's here, high volume of caseworker. Can somebody help me wordsmith this? Do you see what we need to do? Because I think if we have a list that is providing, maintaining, providing, participating, organizing, I don't know that we can have a separate semicolon standalone structure in that same recommendation. So maybe I don't think we can start with for. It's got to be an ing word. So holding the trainings or events described in C on a regular basis, comma, for those agencies that frequently receive a high volume of casework requests, comma, to receive user experience feedback from congressional caseworkers. Okay, that at least captures in a structural, grammatical, consistent way. But is this now substantively, Cheryl, is this like capturing your thing, your concern? And then have we lost anything in the collapsing of the list that was previously, that's now X'd out at lines 193 and following?
I think the feedback, I'm sorry, if you're asking me, I think we dropped a little bit. I'm comparing the strikeout under the line and it's feedback on any web-based portal that's maintained. And that whole thing was very confusing to me because some of what was in there was going. I'm trying to separate out those lines to make sure we're capturing everything that was supposed to go from the agency to the caseworkers in C, and then take what was supposed to be feedback from the caseworkers back to the agency in D. And I think we might have lost some nuances, but I also can see deferring this to the Committee on Style, or even if you wanted take as an action, rewriting, like wordsmithing this a little bit for better language for next Friday so we don't hold up today.
Okay, I am comfortable with that. Bernie, is your hand back up? I know you wanted to talk about something else. Is your hand back up about this before or it's on the new thing? Okay, go ahead. So, oh, Bernie, you're mute.
So you ready for me to talk about the other point, or?
If people are comfortable, and I think we've lost the room on C and D, so I'm feeling like it's a strong move to Committee on Style. Okay, great. So then I'm ready for you to talk about your other thing.
Okay, great. Just briefly, in B, we talk about simplified plain language summaries or flowcharts. We had similar language to this in a previous recommendation. I think it was adopting standard operating procedures, paragraph 2. We changed that language to something
Conrad,
broader.
I don't think it's paragraph 2 here, is it?
Oh.
Bernie, are you talking about paragraph 2 here?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I was looking at an older thing. So if you could search
Here, okay, yeah, got it. So we're in line 104. Mm-hmm.
Right. So succinctly, document, produce plain language materials that succinctly summarize them. That I think that was the substitute for the flow chart line.
So, yeah, so in other words, you're just sort of saying, let's delete that.
Sorry, I thought Bernie was saying that we should just be consistent with how we describe plain language material.
Oh.
So just porting that language from earlier into this context, right?
Right, yes.
What is it? Any.
Okay.
It was simplified plain language materials are simple and simplify. So
how about we just do a note that has to be consistent? Committee on Style can make that consistent. Is that, Bernie? That's the thrust of your request, right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. So so we A, B, C, D. What's at E now?
Sorry, just one moment.
No problem.
What is it D now?
Okay, so we have the bigger trainings organized by other people and informal meetings. Are we okay with these as structured? Okay, I don't see any other comments, so I'm pausing. So let's just note that 17 now says solicit user experience feedback, but we just put that up in line 192. So what do we do with that? The way we have it right now is in 16D is like among the ways that agencies should consider solicit or like building relationships. In D, we have it as an actual kind of instruction. Bernie?
Yeah, so as I recall, isn't D for high volume agency.
I know, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like in D, we separated it out sort of intentionally in D, but now we have it as a specific direction with a should. So this is now inconsistent, is what I'm saying.
Oh, so I think everybody presumably should be getting some feedback, but D is talking about holding the high volume agencies holding these sessions in person so they can get feedback. So it only applies to D only applies to high volume agencies.
Okay, so you're saying it's not inconsistent. My concern was that it was inconsistent the way we were talking about. You're saying it's not inconsistent because D is about the format and 17 is about the like general, this is a good idea too.
Right, and
Okay.
D is only limited to high volume agents.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. Cheryl, I see some vigorous head nodding. So I think
and maybe C and D shouldn't be separated. Maybe D should be a qualifier to C, because to me, what we're saying in D is just, hey, if you're gonna do these and you're a high volume, do them in person. Whereas in E, what's now E, what we're saying is solicit feedback, whether I think it was Amy or Nina said we did surveys, others could be informal calls. Whereas in D, all I was saying about doing it in person to solicit feedback was to meet Sean's point that sometimes those trainings had two purposes.
So then I have to confess, I do not understand what you were suggesting. I thought I did understand how we separated C and D, but I no longer do then. So because D doesn't say, there's nothing about D that says in person, it just says on a regular basis. And what we've put in D for line 192 is specifically about soliciting user feedback. So
then maybe I should have been more clear. See, to me, D is don't record and rely on your recordings if you're a high volume agency. If you're a high volume agency, that training in C should be live or virtual so you can get feedback as well as give training. That's what I'm trying to get across in D. That's why I wasn't sure why D was getting separated out, but I thought maybe there was some historical precedent or something that I don't understand. But I think D is a qualifier to C, that recording shouldn't be your first choice if you're a high volume agency, because if you do it live and in person, not only can you train, but you can receive feedback at the same time.
Okay, so then what if we go back to what's now D, but hit delete, Conrad? So make D, fold D into part of C, but so lowercase h, do it right after the semicolon. And it should say, so after, in line 189, after in response to request semicolon, it should say and comma.
You at one
right
line
there.
99? Yep.
Yeah, right there where the little, yeah, and comma. For those agencies that frequently receive a high volume of caseworm requests, comma, holding these trainings or events live and on a regular basis, comma,
is preferable.
No, because we still can't have a verb there. It's like all got to be grammatically parallel. But like, don't you want to say something about, don't you want to say to receive user experience feedback? Do you want that here? And for those agencies that frequently receive a high volume of case requests, holding these trainings or events live and on a regular basis to receive user experience feedback, semicolon, and then moving to the next one. Like, I'm now trying to capture, I didn't understand that you wanted those live and so I think so I'm trying to wordsmith what I think you're saying, but I'm missing the goal of what you're saying. So why don't I let you say whatever it is that you want to say, and then Nina, I'll get you in, and Bernie, I'll get you in, because maybe I'm just missing something here.
I may not understand the grammatic constraints we have, but if I had no grammatic constraints, the way I would say this is, but for those agencies that frequently receive a high volume of requests, it is preferred these trainings or events occur live or virtually and on a regular basis to also receive user feedback.
So I'm sorry, Cheryl, where are you proposing that we
So
revise
I'm
this?
not proposing language yet. I'm trying to explain what
You
I'm,
just put
'cause
the
I
word
don't understand.
preferably
I'm
in
sorry.
I would just say after you go, for those agencies that frequently receive a high volume of casework requests, preferably holding these trainings or events live and on a regular basis to receive user feedback.
To also receive user feedback. So it's clear it's a two-way thing.
Okay. Yeah, sure. But the preferably goes with
Okay. Okay, we're gonna have a split infinitive problem from somebody on the floor, so we'll deal with that later though. Okay, so I think, can you just flag that though, Conrad, so we can circle back to that thing, like placement. So then I think we can delete D. And now I think then what's separate in, can we now go down to just like take another look at 17? Agencies should periodically solicit user input and user experience related feedback. So now it is just totally separate. Now it does not feel duplicative. Now I understand the way they nest. So thank you for your persistence, Cheryl, and for your patience with me trying to capture all of this, and to everybody else who gave input in this dimension too. Okay, so Cheryl, is there, your hand is up. Do you still want to say something about this, or you're good now? Okay, Bernie, your hand is up.
I'll pass. I think it's been resolved.
Okay. All right, so I think we're on 17, but I think we have now sort of done 17 as we also clarified our recommendation from the previous one. John, can I turn to you to talk about your proposal for a macro training or web page consolidation rather?
Sure. There's thousands of caseworkers and there's hundreds of agencies, and for each agency to create the connections that are envisioned in the previous paragraphs is kind of and reworking it is kind of an enormous effort. In the executive branch, there was a similar kind of effort to bring together all agencies, strategic plans, performance reports, financial statements, and there's now a performance.gov website where an individual can find anything from any agency in one place. They don't have to go rummage around in an agency's website. I think that the House and Senate, or maybe even combined, or an external entity, can bring all these threads together so that there's not as much churn in the learning process from new staff.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you for that explanation and suggestion. Okay, other reactions to this, substantive or anything else? Michael.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the efforts you were describing in other contexts that do this. My one question was, what happens when the SOPs change? I'm assuming these are not going to be static. Will it be difficult to sort of get that information and collect it in one place? So that was my one question that I had. How would that work?
Well, in the case of performance.gov, the agencies control what's on their button on the government-wide webpage. So when they update their strategic plans or the quarterly update their progress on agency priority goals, that just appears on their own webpage, and then it's fed over into the consolidated site because it's just linked.
So we wouldn't have that kind of automatic thing here, but so we could add a comma at the end of this, comma, and agencies should send updated SOPs.
Well, it's not that they send them. It's
just
that the central site links to them.
Okay.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought you were distinguishing between what was happening. So you're saying that it could be, this is now beyond my technological capacity, but like if the URL would change.
Oh, the agencies have to tell them that, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So it's not sending updated, I don't know, then agencies should ensure the links to their SOPs are updated. How's that?
That is capturing what I was trying to sort of smooth over between the two of you. So Bernie?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, just a jurisdictional question. Do we make recommendations to the House and its administrative officers of, I mean, it seems a little bit odd, but really just a question. And then secondly, I guess the addition that you're working on, the last clause, it might just be better to make it more general and say agencies should cooperate with any such effort. Or that's one option anyway. Maybe the specificity is good, but cooperate would mean not just, sending your URL or sending the SOP, but whatever the House administration or the congressional administration needs, try to provide it if you can.
Okay, Matt, can I ask you to respond to Bernie's general procedural thing? I know all the time we do direct recommendations to Congress. I can't off the top of my head think of a super specific direction like this, but that doesn't mean either we haven't or that it's not okay.
Matt? Yeah, it's unusual. I have not seen anything this precise. It's not to say that we can't do it, because in our statute, we are allowed to make recommendations to Congress generally, and it doesn't say anything about limit this way. I can look for examples in the archives, but I don't have any off the top of my head.
Okay. John?
I was going to suggest expanding it beyond the SOPs to those more simplified flow charts and whatnot that we reference above, and also the training videos, if any.
Mm-hmm. So SOPs, comma, simplified plain language materials, comma, and training materials, comma, if any, or parentheses, if any.
Sorry,
or and any training materials. Right, Conrad? Is that what you were saying? And any training materials. Okay. All right. So we're going to keep furthering this as we get more voices in the room. So Amy.
Well, instead of having one consolidated web page, what about having the agencies use a similar URL like they did in the Obama administration, I think, for open government, so that you are able to find like off the agency homepage, the open.gov page, or whatever we want, whatever they decide to call it, the congressional response page or something short, where you go to that page and you find all of this information. And so each agency has a similar URL.
So your
instead of
point
making
also,
it one. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, so then instead of having one page, one consolidated page with all these various links, just use a similar link so that people can find the information.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And yet another version, which is where I originally thought you were going, is just that instead of directing this to the congressional entities, that it could just be like what John was saying about performance.gov. So it could just be, congressional constituents.gov or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that would be it, but that the executive branch itself would sort of have everything consolidated. Okay. John?
I think that was sort of conceptually where I was going, and then OMB said, we don't want to have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
But if you look at performance.gov, that's run by OMB. And if you look at evaluation.gov, that's run by OMB. So you have OMB that does these things, but I can understand why there would be a sensitivity to being inserting themselves between agencies and Congress on anything.
So, I mean, this could be the place, though, to do what Bill Funk was suggesting before. Are you, and sort of saying OMB should, and then are you suggesting that you want to sort of preliminarily be respectful of that, so not even put them in here? Or
I'm saying that let's let the House and the Senate take the lead, and they could do this combined, or they could work with the Congressional Management Foundation, or delegate this to GAO, or it's just that somebody needs to be the owner of this effort to bring things together, and whether it's in the executive or legislative branch, again, it's just somewhere it needs to happen. And by defining it here, we're tagging somebody with the accountability for it, but they may say, no, we don't want to do this, it costs money. So I don't know.
Right. Okay. And so Michael. I lost you. And
sorry about
that's
that.
Okay. That's okay.
So I think if the proposal is for the links to be displayed and not the SOPs themselves, it might be clearer if it said create a web page that consolidates links to agencies' SOPs. I think that would be clearer if that's the intent.
Okay. And we still haven't really substantively discussed Amy's suggestion that just the agencies themselves all own some version of the URL. I don't even know who would be in charge of that. Right.
That's done by OMB.
Yeah. I mean, so I think we might be maybe operating under the assumption that OMB is not going to be involved here. And so I'm not hearing like a huge movement behind the Bill Funk suggestion, which was also, I'm not sure if it was sort of in jest or not. So I think maybe let's just delete this 19. Again, hands are welcome, people. So get your hands up if you want to come in on this. But I think maybe let's just stick with what we have here. And then are people comfortable with this last bit going to committee on style to like smooth over the exact? Okay, great. So flag that, Conrad. Thank you. Yep, perfect. Okay, can we now go back to what was new 15 up at the top? It just didn't seem to me that it was going to be like the very first thing we should start with here. Although maybe I was completely wrong about that. But when communicating with congressional caseworkers in the course of receiving, processing, or responding to casework requests, agencies should ensure that each communication identifies as appropriate any applicable legal constraints. So this is a really specific thing rather than a very general thing. And we were starting initially with the general thing, but then remember, we had this limitation that originally had been up in the SOPs and we brought it down for this section. So I welcome feedback on both the specifics, substance, but also where it should go. Bernie?
Yeah, I just think it shouldn't be first, and something with communicating effectively with Congress. I think starting out negatively is probably not the best thing to do.
That was kind of my instinct as well. Okay, so let's cut it and move it to should we move it in between 17 and 18?
Fine with me.
John, I can't tell if you are okay. And does anybody have any substantive input on this or no? We sort of talked about this at the beginning when we were working on the SOP, so maybe people are okay with this. Okay, so we still have to go back and revisit, especially the two new paragraphs in subsection 1 So let's do that now. I am going to simply stretch, and I encourage anybody who would like to stretch also to do so. I'm just going to stand up because we are moving towards a new thing, and I don't know, my brain works best if I am not staying put at the same thing. So okay, I did not see anybody take me up on that, which is fine. None of my students do either. Let's go back to, I only want to focus on what we have to focus on here in the SOPs. So I think if we didn't get any feedback on the committee on style stuff, I'm going to suggest that people didn't have any feedback to weigh in on. So like that's kind of where I am. So I think we should address the substantive input that we did get. Although, Conrad, are you now fixing a...
This was all committee on style.
This was all committee on style stuff from what was there before. Okay, so I think let's go to Cheryl's question about why we use the word ombuds instead of ombudsman.
So I don't care which it is. It just needs to be consistent, because on line 29 you use ombudsman, and
okay.
I will defer to the committee on style of which of the two is right. I just think consistency.
Don't we have some recommendation already on this? I assume this is to be gender neutral.
Correct. It was an attempt to be gender neutral, and the reference to Office of the Ombudsman is a reference to the title of a specific office.
Okay, Matt, you went up very quickly and then came back down. Perhaps you were commenting simply on the evolution of the gendered language. I don't know exactly.
Oh,
Get
I
back
was just
up if
gonna
you'd like
point
to be.
out, I don't know if Conrad was there. There was I think there was like a 5-minute discussion at a committee meeting yesterday on whether we use, or Monday or Wednesday, on whether ombuds should be used. And I think the committee agreed on ombuds. So this would be consistent with the other recommendation.
Okay. All right. Let's just keep that then. Okay. So then I think it's really committee on style stuff other than Bernie's new additions. And so that's what I want to focus on. I could be wrong, but my recollection was that we had that Cheryl thing, and then yeah, Conrad. So I think we talked about this already.
Happy with that. And this is the content that was shifted down into paragraph.
Yep. So we're okay. We just moved that. So now we get to Bernie's suggestions, and so Bernie, I will turn it over to you. I'm not sure if people had a chance to look at this, but Bernie wants to talk to us about how to handle the emergency language that we put in last time, and he has some additional thoughts about that. So Bernie, why don't you go ahead, and maybe you should talk about your interlocking recommendations on this front.
Sure. Okay. So basically, this is a follow-up from last time. I think that Sean made a great point based on his work on the report that there were emergency circumstances in which agencies' prioritization of casework requests changed. And so we initially had common circumstances in which priorities would change. And then we added or emergency. There was a little bit of a concern that, well, that's kind of obvious. If emergencies happen, then of course they will change prioritization. I thought it made sense and kind of focus more on what Sean was describing to us and suggesting, to not focus so much on whether an emergency would change the priorities, but focus on, with respect to particular emergencies, how that emergency had changed the agency's prioritization, and have essentially the agency advise people that, oh, we're in an emergency situation. This is how our prioritization, our standard prioritization system has been altered to meet that emergency, and other processes that may have to be changed to meet that emergency. And we estimate that the emergency will last such a period of time. So to do that, the first the first alternative is the more stripped down version that essentially takes out again or emergency and then adds this language at the end of H, as well as any temporary changes in prioritization procedures that have been adopted to address emergency circumstances. The second alternative is to be more specific, and that's number 2 here that talks about when an agency receives a sudden increase in congressional casework requests, which I think was the paradigm that Sean mentioned to us last time, or some other emergency that requires it to modify, the agency to modify the prioritization of casework, that it then identify this is an emergency situation, this is what's changing as a result of having to deal with this emergency, and if possible, here's our estimate for how long this emergency will take. So essentially, this is an effort to get at what I perceive to be what Sean and others were concerned about in adding the or emergency and kind of teasing that out a bit more. But I'm interested in knowing whether other people kind of perceived it the same way and whether this is helpful essentially. So
okay, great. And so that's so helpful. And so you're asking us basically to consider your modification to either H or 2, right? They're not.
Or just add 2.
Yeah.
Or I suppose you
just
could both, but.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what do I'd love to get some input on these various alternatives about the emergency language. I don't remember who originally was the one who suggested the adding of the emergency language. Maybe that was Cheryl or Nina. Somebody last time. We didn't have emergency originally. I don't know if somebody, anyway, it doesn't matter. Anybody who wants to take the lead is too scary. Anybody who wants to get their hand up to weigh in on these various alternatives is most welcome to do so now. David?
I think I slightly prefer the version in H to the version in 2, and more just because the more specific language there usually leads to increased procedural requirements and compliance. And I would like them to just have a little bit more flexibility to respond to changes without having to do a bunch of sign-offs and check-offs.
That was my instinct too, for what it's worth. But I'd love to hear if anybody else wants to weigh in one or the other direction. Okay, I'm looking around. I see people reading. Bill?
I think I prefer H as well.
Okay. All right. So unless anybody's going to weigh in strongly to the contrary, Bernie, thank you for offering both of these alternatives. So let's cut 2 and let's use H, Bernie's revision to H. And now there is one more. And so I think you can resolve, that.
Yep, and we've already.
Do we need to talk about this? I think we already dealt with that, right?
Yeah.
Conrad?
Yep.
So yeah, okay,
Right.
so just resolve that. So then I think, Bernie, let's go to your other recommendation, which was, why don't you introduce this to us, if you don't mind?
Sure. So essentially, it seems to me that we should ensure that staff members who are dealing directly with congressional caseworkers feel comfortable in raising concerns about discomfort with what they're being asked to do or what's being requested, or in a sort of inappropriateness, and be able to raise that to a higher level and have higher level people deal with the problem if those higher level people feel it's warranted. And so this is a suggestion for doing that. I suppose this may be redundant because it's obvious, and any agency would naturally do this. But I wanted to make sure that frontline workers dealing with congressional caseworkers have a level of comfort that they could raise concerns in the agency.
Before I call on John, can I just get a clarifying question, Bernie? So did we take out then the should not provide, I'm quoting from your comment on the side, should not provide assistance or relief based on a request exceeding the scope on the ethics rules. Did that used to be somewhere, like it used to be here, and you?
I believe Bernie flagged that for the committee's consideration prior to the first meeting.
I see. So this is his revision of that. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Great. And then last, congressional casework offices in line 103. Do you mean that inside agencies? You don't mean that inside Congress, right?
Yes, inside agencies, yes.
Okay. John?
Just a quick editorial. It says casework staff to raise concerns. How about escalate? Does that sound, it doesn't matter. It just.
Great. And we delete the comma after concerns in line 100. And I haven't seen that many ACUS things that sort of allude to improper congressional action. And so I know we're smoothing over the ethics language that Bernie had originally offered us, but I just want to flag, anticipating channeling floor comments. I'm just wondering whether improper is the right word that we want to use, or casework requests that go beyond the scope of blah, 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 blah. John?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that it might be, we might need a narrower word there, because one of the problems that we ran into was that caseworkers making a request to an agency that the agency felt as though was just frivolous. And, it's part of the report that the caseworker is really the middle person between the constituent and the agency, and sometimes they're just doing it to, mollify a difficult constituent. I don't know if that's improper casework request, but it could be interpreted that way by the agency personnel with this statement.
Okay, all right. That's a helpful context. Amy, let's go to you.
I was just going to say, I had a slightly different take than Sean, that maybe it was the caseworker being unprofessional towards the staff person when delivering the request. So maybe we do need some clarification here, like if the caseworker is yelling at the agency staff or for some reason, or.
But I also wonder whether we want to be less specific and more capacious in a way that would allow for just general concerns. So I'm not sure exactly how to handle that. Bill?
Well, I thought that the language that there actually takes care of both Sean's and Amy's concerns. I mean, I just think it's pretty broad as it is. Improper casework requests could be improper for a number of different reasons, or improper conduct could be certainly somebody's yelling at somebody, that'd be improper conduct. And it doesn't say they have to raise it. It says there's a mechanism for it. That's what we're saying, provide a mechanism. So there's a mechanism so people know where they should go if they want to go, but doesn't tell them they have to go. So I thought the current language was fine.
Okay. David?
Sorry if I've forgotten this in Sean's report. Is this a big problem that we're solving here? I don't get a sense for the frequency with which agency liaisons are treated poorly by staff or abused by them or asked to do things that are illegal. And the reason I say that is just, I'm not sure we want to add another process that is rarely used, but adds to the administrative burden of people trying to respond to these requests. So Sean, maybe you can clarify for me how big a problem this is. I know that frivolous requests are put in, but that's different than abuse, I think.
Yeah, and Conrad, if you could step in if you have any recollections, but I don't recall much complaining coming from the agency personnel that we talked to about, dealing with congressional caseworkers. Obviously, relationships are relationships, and you have an uneven amount of training and experience by congressional staff, but they seem to be fairly good with the way that they were being treated. Conrad, is your recollection any different?
No, I actually that gels with mine, and I think the only instance of colorable, like, alleged impropriety was the instance that you mentioned about people submitting frivolous members and their staff forwarding what are facially frivolous requests, things like saying the income tax is unconstitutional, forwarding things on like that. But I don't recall hearing any discussion of among agency staff of instances in which they were being asked by caseworkers to do something that they are not allowed or unable to do. So I don't recall hearing about that.
Okay. Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Eloise. I don't usually like to speak or weigh in on committee deliberations, but I urge you strongly, as head of this agency having to defend all these recommendations, to not call anything that the Congress or the staffers do improper, inappropriate, frivolous, or unprofessional. We don't need to go there and bite off that trouble. And from the inside agency perspective, I agree with what David said. Believe me, people dealing with casework requests have no problem or do not need to be reminded that they can go to their supervisors and complain about it. In fact, they do that much more often than they really should. And one man's frivolous is another woman's constitutional law. Not everybody knows that the income tax is constitutional. I don't think it's frivolous for a constituent to write in and ask about that. So please don't include this recommendation.
Can I ask you, Andy? So I am very uncomfortable with the word improper, which is why I was seizing on it. But if it were more general, that said something like agencies should provide a mechanism for their casework staff to escalate any concerns about particular casework requests, period. Like, would that also fall into the same troublesome category for you, or no?
Not part A of troublesome. No, that's fine. But part B of not necessary.
Yeah. Okay. So can we just think through? Thank you so much for that input on both part A and part B. So, and also sort of trying to balance all these things. I don't have the role of ACUS chair. I do have the role of committee chair. So I'm going to now just like gather members' responses to Andy's thoughtful breaking things out into A and B. And so the sort of like, don't borrow trouble from Congress, but also, is it actually necessary? I've now proposed a possibility to kind of separate these out, but I really want to see where the committee is on this. So Bill, let me go to you.
Well, I take Andy's advice very strongly, and I completely agree with him on that point. I have no problem with your suggestion, Eloise, if that's acceptable to Andy, because I think that certainly does the trick as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Bill. Bernie?
So I'm inclined to withdraw this unless someone really wants to push it forward. I mean, as I said earlier, I wasn't sure whether this was a problem or not. From what I hear, it does not seem to be a problem.
So I think then if you're prepared to withdraw it, and I'm hearing kind of support in general for Andy's concern A, and then a lack of necessity in the report underlying Andy's point B, I think maybe, Bernie, let's just withdraw the proposal. Okay.
So withdrawn.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Bernie.
Sure.
So let's, I think you can, I think then we don't need to, right? Is that what you're doing? Yeah, Conrad.
Yep.
Okay, great. And then was there anything else that we had to revisit? Yes, there is, in managing casework requests. I see it's 3:53. We're going to be out of here by 4.
I will defer that to the Committee on Style. It just was a wordsmithing proposal, so it's not meant to change anything.
Okay, not a substance, Committee on Style. Okay, great. So I think everything else then, so one, congratulations everybody, because we made it through all of the recommendations and revisited all of the substance from before. So I think everything that remains as kind of like a track change kind of thing in the recommendations is either something that Conrad still just needs to accept, or there's a handful of things that have been committed to the Committee on Style. So when we come back next time, let's start and work and spend most of the time really on the preamble. So I'm just going to urge people to submit comments in advance so that we can work comments with specific language in advance so that we can really be efficient and specific on that. And also, if you could take a look at the Committee on Style stuff as well, and just, pre-submit anything or just be prepared to run through any of that perfectly quickly, then I think we'll be in very good shape and may not even need to use all of our meeting time for next week. But so my understanding, and Conrad, you can double check me here, or Matt, you can double check me, is that our final meeting is next Friday, May 3rd, a week from today, from 2 to 5 p.m. So it's at a slightly different time than this 1 to 4 slide is. Okay, do I have any other comments from anybody else that I need to respond to? I'm looking around for hands or the gesture of somebody obviously trying to find a hand. Seeing none, I'm going to thank everybody for your excellent, substantive, procedural, collaborative work today. I think we really did some excellent work. So thanks everybody, and I'll see you next Friday.
Thank you, Eloise, and everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye.